opinions of Genesis Communications, its management, staff, or advertisers.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Granosky. So glad to be with you again live for another journey through the news together like nobody else does in media. We get into anthropology and history and ethics and physics and science. We get into nutrition and medical information, all the things weaving in and out. Principles of personhood, principles of skin in the game, love of our neighbor, rolling up our sleeves and solving problems together. Neighborhood is the key. Localism. That's what it's all about, folks, on this broadcast. And you know it, that we want to continually push against the negativity that we see in the groupthink media. Groupthink media wants us in a low resolution. They want us to hate people. They want us to not like each other. And for whatever reason, that makes them feel better because they have a lot of apparent hatred to spread to other people. That's why they want us to be miserable like them. Misery loves company, right? And that's what we see from that media complex. We had a great inaugural small group Zoom discussion today on Zoom with some folks, listeners of the program, friends of the program, stopping by together to do a really fascinating discussion. And we didn't record it. It's just going to be something for folks to enjoy in the conversations themselves. And it was a great discussion because people really know what's going on because they have an informational background, a understanding of anthropology kind of guiding their understanding of the news. And that's very important. If we don't have that kind of context undergirding our ability to see current events, then we will just be caught up in the noise and confusion. We won't know how to navigate all the nonsense. And so that's why we had a great discussion today. And one of the things that I thought about in this discussion today for our listeners was that it's pretty apparent that everything they're trying to do is going to end up backfiring and failing. As we see today, in just a moment, Biden's going to be doing his press conference, where he's going to be given a script by the D.C. Uniparty that governs Republicans and Democrats. And he's going to tell people what D.C. wants him to tell them. He's an empty suit, if there's ever been one. And he is an empty vessel for whatever special interests control D.C. And he is a corporatist. He is owned 100% by giant corporations and special interests. He doesn't have a voice of his own. He's there just to be a conduit for their interests. And their interests are selfish, misguided, foolish, callous, cold, disregarding of human dignity, disregarding of scientific facts, disregarding of basic moral decency, shameful to the core. And history indicts them in real time. It indicts them when they stole from the Ukrainian people and scammed their way around the globe, pillaging people in different countries. History indicts the Biden crime family for what they did to places like Haiti, what they did to places like Iraq, where he got a no big contract for his brother to rebuild the homes that he voted to demolish in the people's neighborhoods of Iraq. It's a shameful, pitiful, pathetic empty suit. The fact that anybody with a brain and an adult mentality would even think to listen to that fool for information is just an indictment on the low garbage quality of our government school systems, and an indictment on the garbage media complex that has been propping up this weekend at Bernie's presidency all the way. Meanwhile, by the way, they do nothing for the millions of people. They said, remember all those fools, those McWoke fools that burned down cities in the name of justice? They've done nothing to hold Biden accountable for his pledge to do justice. He's done nothing in criminal justice. He hasn't set a single captive free. He's a freaking liar, and I told you he was a liar. It didn't matter to those bigots. They just wanted to burn people's homes down. They just wanted to burn poor people's neighborhoods because they thought it was cool. They thought they were Foot Clan soldiers from the Ninja Turtles movie, dressing up in costume, LARPing. So when I look at this speech that he's about to make for special interests, he's going to try to lash out. He wants to do some lashing, more scapegoating, more otherizing, more attacks against the moral integrity of people who don't want to take his products that his owners tell him to take, that you have to take. He's going to try to punish people who don't obey. He's going to try to punish dissidents. That's not the role of a presidency. The founders would be spitting at the disgrace of this country, of what it's become. They'd be spitting upon the mockery of this disgusting coup against the rule of law that has been taking place in D.C. for some time from both parties. Disregard for the rule of law. I heard the ABC already been chewed garbage corporate hack media news break on radio saying, oh, that the Texas law was an attack against the Constitution. These fools, these liars, these postmodern nihilists are shameless. They actually think that the founding fathers intended there to be a right in the Constitution. Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Madison, these folks who were around at the founding time and worked out these ideas, they thought, they want you to believe that they put in the Constitution the right to be able to execute a baby all the way up to 9 months. As long as you don't see it with your own eyes, it's not alive. That's disgusting, nihilistic attack against human dignity. And they want you to believe that they put that in the Constitution. It's a disgrace to anybody with a brain and a heart and a conscience and any basic level of education would laugh at how pathetic that is. But you don't get education in a lot of government schools. You get unions, big unions, which are just as corrupt as big business, taking advantage of their monopoly over that sector and really ripping people off and giving them garbage ideology. You saw what that Antifa teacher did. There's a lot of people like that in the school systems pushing garbage ideology. And it's not just people like that. It's the system itself. They want people to be good worker bees, good conformists. When someone tells you jump, you jump. You say how high, right? And that's what they want. But Biden's mad, so he wants to lash out at dissidents. He wants to lash out at people who don't want to take his master's products. They don't want to put it in their, their kids. They don't want to put these injections into their kids. So he's going to lash out at them. He's embarrassed that the Afghanistan thing was such a blunder. He's embarrassed. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the regime that he represents. They're embarrassed. DC elitists are embarrassed that Taliban has already painted over their social justice murals in Kabul. They're embarrassed that they are so stupid they couldn't even get 500 dogs removed from their facility. They couldn't even get soldiers protected in the situation that they were in, being left to be blown up by attacks from terrorists. They're embarrassed at how stupidly incompetent they are. The whole world's laughing at these pathetic losers in D.C. They can't even figure out how to pull out right. Spent $2 trillion, they got nothing. All they did was build back better the Taliban. So they're embarrassed, they're humiliated, and they're petty, miserable people. So instead of taking that and using it as an opportunity to humble their stupidity, no, they're going to double down by trying to lash out at domestic citizens who don't want to take endless booster shots till kingdom come. They don't want to do it. And so they're going to be scapegoated. They're going to be picked on from these losers, these mediocrities. They think they're smart, but they're not. And they're starting to realize they're not smart. And it bothers them. It bothers them that they went to the little education enclaves. They got their useless degrees from Foucault fans. They thought they had it figured out. And then everything just slaps them in the face. Reality just catches right back up to them. They don't know how to do economics. Inflation is going through the roof. What do? They blame meat. Stupid, stupid people. Idiots. These are children. They want to take responsibility for putting trillions of dollars. They are so dumb. They think that we're stupid enough to believe that they can spend trillions of dollars out of thin air, and somehow that has no connection to inflation. It's just the greedy meat people that are raising their prices. These people are stupid, and we know they're dumb. They know that we know they're dumb, and they're embarrassed. So they want to scapegoat people and divide us. That's why they spend so much of their time trying to divide powerless middle-class African Americans and Hispanics and whites against each other, and Asians too. They want to divide everybody. You all separate into teams and you fight each other, because that way they can continue making money for their military-industrial complex, their big pharma complex, and everybody can't unite for the protection of their own families and liberties because everybody's too busy fighting over which team or which ethnic group is the most victimized from this crooked system. It's a beautiful way to divide people, because it's much more easier for people to be drawn into conflict with neighbors down the road that don't look like them, unfortunately, especially when the media is always stoking those types of things, rather than to focus their attention on the systemic oppression taking place from D.C. and Wall Street and all the other crooks that are manipulating the economy for their own benefit. See, they don't want us to unite together because their game's up. When everybody unites, gender wars stop, when the racial divisions and voting lines stop, when people start uniting and saying, you know what? You're my brother. You're born with the image of God just like I am. You don't have a right to be coerced to take whatever you want. You don't have a right to be told that you got to go to a cage if you take a marijuana drug, and you don't have to have a right to be caged or separated from society if you don't want to take a pharma product. We're going to protect each other together across racial boundaries. That's what they are terrified of. So they keep us distracted with these stupid narratives. And what they're doing is trying to sow division so that the obvious allies in this country, the people who've all been screwed over together, where 80% of the wealth is in the hands of Wall Street and special interests, and they actually convince the people that are screwing the people over to vote for Biden or even Trump. These people have done nothing to rein in Wall Street. They've done nothing to rein in the power of big business over our lives. All they've done is entrench it ever more every day. But they've convinced us that we have to hate our neighbor more than we hate the system itself. They've convinced us to turn to easy scapegoats, tribalism, and be so excited about our rival team having punishment or tears or so forth. So this is a time where we can really step back and see the scapegoating machine of the state as it really is. They go from blunder to blunder. They made a mess out of Afghanistan, but they made everybody filthy rich who were their friends, sitting with nice zip codes that you won't have, sitting with nice homes and cars that you don't get to have, getting nice mansions that you don't have. And what do you have? Instead, you have debt piling up, $2 trillion for Afghanistan, trillions for the other Middle Eastern interventions. And they have nice, expensive, fancy, loot paid for homes. It's sick. And what are we supposed to do about it? We have to unite for our freedoms, unite against endless spending, unite against the idea, again, that DC owns our bodies. And they're using this emergency powers under this pandemic to try to make permanent emergency powers so that they can tell you when you're allowed to come into a restaurant. You think it'll stop at boosters? It won't. They'll attach it. They've already said that climate change is a public health crisis. And they've already said that meat is one of the number one things they want to target with that. You're going to have a time where they would love to attach it so that you have to measure whether you, have you been eating meat? That's going to be required eventually for a health passport. A lot of people would love to do that because they think they own your body. They think that they are the masters of the world and that they're gods. And if you want to step away from their control, then they want to scapegoat you and sacrifice you and exclude you from society. But they're not in charge of history. Jesus is the master of history. He said it is better that to have mercy rather than to do sacrifice. He says also that God desires the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. And that's not the way they teach us in public schools. They teach us to hate each other, to hate the other tribe, to hate the other team, to hate the other group, to be collectivist, to be selfish. And that whole system is going to have to learn to follow the rules of history, which is going to bend towards the master of history himself. And that is that when he says the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, what is he talking about there? He's talking about this idea that the more they try to persecute and scapegoat people, the more it will build a blowback that will ruin the ability for them to create unity and unanimity around excluding those people. That could be for any type of excuse in history. And so you will see that the more they try to marginalize people that don't want to take their forced, because it doesn't matter whether you take the product or not, we should all be opposed to their little mandates and their little digital passport systems they're trying to roll out. All of us, no matter what we believe, what we take, if we take all of the products or whatever, we should all be opposed to this. And their idea is going to backfire because the more they marginalize and scapegoat people who don't want to be treated like cattle with a digital passport to get into restaurants and places and travel, the more they double down on their hatred, the more it's going to blow back. And more people are going to say, nope, this is unjust. This is unjust persecution and scapegoating. That's what it means, that the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. That is the theme of history that's going to continue to break to pieces any attempts to create more power consolidation on excluding a scapegoat group. We'll take a break and return live on A Neighbor's Choice. You can call in at 727-587-1040. That's 727-587-1040. Back in a moment.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is definitive with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A neighbor's choice returns. Here's a story in the Telegraph. Teenage boys more at risk from the government's mandated medicines than COVID. Young males are 6 times more likely to suffer from heart problems after getting the products than to be hospitalized from the virus, study finds. So that was just published today. So more science, people who are actually doing the work instead of doing this fake McWoke science, this garbage fake science, pseudoscience, nonsense science. This is just political science. That's what they mean when they say, I follow the science. They're just following political science. They're dupes. More science continues to come out to disrupt the hive mind Borg mentality. A commenter named Matt says the FDA is telling you not to use FDA-approved medications that have been prescribed billions of times and are completely safe for decades. But they are telling you that the experimental and untested product is safe and the majority of you are buying it. It's unbelievable. I don't know if the majority of people are buying it, but a lot of people are. A lot of people feel forced to. They feel like they have no other choice. And they feel like, well, if everybody's doing it, it must be safe. The establishment is not really a sane source of information right now for a lot of different things. I mean, look at these different stories. Real America's Voice has a story. USDA announces racial preferences in new climate-smart agriculture funding. $50 million racial equity and justice grant program announced, despite federal judges ordered a department to stop race-based loan forgiveness. So they're trying to make different racial, pecking orders and different things like that about who can get money and so forth. And I don't think anybody should get money from this government corporatism. But the point is they're trying to create a very vicious, racist, race-obsessed society because that's how people stop uniting against the system itself and start dividing over which team is the most oppressed, and it creates mutual envy and resentment and tribalism. Tribalism doesn't lead to an intelligence and development of innovation. You have to give way for individual liberty and personhood. When that thrives in a society's cultural imagination, that's when the innovation takes place. That's when nonviolence can flourish and safety can abound. Zero Hedge has a story, harmful language trigger warning added to the U.S. Constitution on National Archives website. So the official United States National Archives website has added a trigger warning to the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and Bill of Rights, which cautions that the documents contain harmful language. I mean, that's insane, isn't it? So they in America today, no movie company wants to make any criticism of China, even though they're doing the most racist and disgusting, hateful, violent policies against people in that country. But what? Oh, you can criticize and talk about how our own founding father documents need trigger warnings to be viewed. It's totally insane. Totally lost any kind of credibility from DC. Let's take a break and more news headlines in just a moment. Stay with us.
It was about 9 o'clock in the morning.
We stood and watched in disbelief.
I was scared. We watched that second plane hit that tower.
I literally just froze.
Kind of shocked.
Afraid.
Saw this terrorist act, and
this moment isn't real.
It was the day that changed America forever.
It was 2 realizations, right? One, the immediate death toll, and then that this was an attack on America.
I don't want people to ever forget.
News Talk 1040.
Government suing the state of Texas over its new abortion law, which bans an abortion 6 weeks after pregnancy. That law allows private citizens, not the state, to enforce the law and get paid. Attorney General Merrick Garland says it's unconstitutional.
The statute deputizes all private citizens without any showing of personal connection or injury to serve as bounty hunters authorized to recover at least $10,000 per claim from individuals who facilitate a woman's exercise of her constitutional rights.
President Biden later today expected to announce vaccination requirements for all federal workers. He'll urge private companies and schools to do the same. Last week, more than 250,000 of the new COVID cases were among children. The FDA ruling to halt sales for more than 950,000 e-cigarette products made by various companies, but regulators say they need more time to review applications from the biggest company, Juul. Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
News Talk 1040 Tampa Bay weather forecast.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Alan Archer at your News Talk 1040 WHBO Weather Center. Disturbance zone of showers and thunder showers is dropping southward into central Florida with a 45% chance of thunder showers this afternoon's high temperature up to 89, 35% tonight. Could see a few showers during the Bucks game, below 78. Tomorrow, clouds, a 35% chance of an anytime thunder shower. High tomorrow, 88. Here at News Talk 1040 WHBO.
David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski, your host. We're live looking at the different news stories of the day. Here's a few more things I saw. That leak of the documents that came out, they're showing Matt Ridley, who's a member of the House of Lords in the United Kingdom, and he is also a scientist, a biologist. He says these are significant documents. They show far more knowledge in the U.S. of Wuhan experiments before the pandemic than previously revealed, and clear gain-of-function results. Had they been released in February 2020, as they should have been, the world would have reacted differently. So when you look at that, I mean, they were actively suppressing this kind of research even taking place. The media was censoring this stuff. They were calling everybody a racist. If you look into this, again, this is the same media and government that will put trigger warnings on viewing the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence. But they do everything to run cover for, our government officials and Chinese government officials who were doing all this experimentation in reckless manners, leading to this thing happening in the first place, the pandemic. Utterly ridiculous. Here's a story on Fox News about the decline of this media group. CNN spent the majority of summer below 1 million viewers, even worse during prime time. The liberal network averaged just 603,000 in total day viewership, a whopping 42% decrease from summer 2020. I mean, you had all kinds of stories going on, big stories, and their ratings are falling like a or off of a cliff. Nobody cares because people know that they're out of ideas intellectually. You know, they're out of ideas. They don't have anything to offer. They're just building negativity, and people don't want to be around negative people. And it's hard not to get drawn into the negativity when there's so much negative stuff going on, right? You got to be positive even when you disagree with the policy. Here's another story that's I thought was of interest in the Daily Wire. It says, DeSantis slams Fauci in fiery exchange at press conference. And a reporter was doing their normal thing of representing the official D.C. Party line. And they said, they began to ask, Governor, you recently said that unvaccinated individuals had no impact on numbers. And Dr. Fauci was quoted saying that, and he cut him off and said, that's not what I said. No, that's not what I said. Not that I ever expect to be quoted properly. What I said was, if you're going to force vaccine mandates on people, just to understand that what the data is showing us about the vaccine, the data is showing us you're much less likely to be hospitalized or die if you're vaccinated. That is true. And I think you see it in the statistics. However, the vaccinations have not created herd immunity. DeSantis continues. So if the idea is that having herd immunity, you force everyone to do this, and that will create a herd immunity, that has not happened. It's still spreading. People who, I mean, obviously in Florida, we're going down now, which is great, but that's not what the issue is. Is it creating a herd immunity? Fauci also said if 50% were vaccinated, you would not see any surges anymore. Well, that isn't true. Look at, obviously, the Sun Belt. Look in the Pacific Northwest. Look at Hawaii, huge surges that you've seen. In an interview with NPR's Morning Edition in December 2020, Fauci was asked by NPR's Rachel Martin how many Americans would need to get vaccinated to impact the number of COVID-19 infections. He replied, I would say 50% would have to get vaccinated before you start to see an impact. He added that if 75 to 85% got vaccinated, we could achieve that blanket of herd immunity. But that's not how it turned out, did it? So, he just says, Fauci just makes stuff up. We get to that point. He said, we'll make an impact if we can get to 50% vaccinated. But now once we've gotten to that threshold, well, lo and behold, it's not stopping. It's not putting up the firewall. The new variant, he couldn't imagine that variants could have happened and that those variants might have the ability to escape where the pressure point has been put on the disease by these products. Oh, of course he couldn't imagine that. He's only the official czar of science proclamations for DC. He couldn't possibly imagine that these things could be able to overcome the prophylactic effect of these products that were leaking. They're not stopping transmission. Plain and simple. So one of the things that we have to do is just push back against the nonsense every time it happens. Meanwhile, look what continues to go on in Australia. Australian state limits residents of COVID-19 lockdown apartments to 6 beers per day. And these guys are just, again, this is like a Stanford prison experiment. The whole world's in a Stanford prison experiment to some degree. But it's acutely ugly right now in places like Australia and certain states. New South Wales State Health Department said that they have had their deliveries, residents said that they have their deliveries searched and have had packages containing alcohol confiscated if the amount exceeds the department's prescribed alcohol limit. This is a story in National Review. In apartment blocks locked down, residents are having their alcohol deliveries policed in accordance with the department's policy, which allows residents to receive a ration of 6 beers or pre-mixed drinks, 1 bottle of wine, or 1 375 milliliter bottle of spirits, according to this Australian website. Any alcohol outside the limit is being confiscated until lockdown rules are lifted, according to the report. Residents may ask a clinician if they want more than the prescribed limits. Do you think this is about safety? I mean, I don't understand how we're going to reach the people who are really buying into this cult, this maniac cult. What the heck does it have to do with safety? That is nanny state nutcases bullying and abusing people. This is disgusting. Who's going to stop these people from hurting people and terrorizing? They keep pushing them and harassing them and bullying them. Absolutely crazy to see this stuff happen. And it's one of those things that, people have to be able to stand up for themselves. They can't allow bullies to just run them all over to the point where they can't even, they can't have more than 6 beers or whatever, or a bottle of wine. What kind of a police state fascist garbage is that? And that's what we keep seeing. We keep seeing this hypocrisy, this disregard for decency and respect normalized by, unfortunately, so much of our government. I mean, it's like that. What happened the other day with Larry Elder, African-American man running for the governor recall election in California, Republican, talk radio host. And you have these disgusting people running up and punching his security detail and attacking them and hitting them, like just hateful, savage behavior. And then this disgusting person coming up with a monkey mask and throwing eggs at him. Just disgusting, repulsive stuff. And again, if this was the opposite, if this was a person who was on the left, an African-American man running for the Democrat, party for an office like this, and I mean, it would be the front page story. As Dave Rubin said, it would be the cover of every newspaper. It'd be on the top of Time magazine. This is a crisis. This is a moment. Oh my goodness. Trump's America is so barbaric and awful and disgusting. But when it happens to the other side, these people couldn't say less. They have nothing to say. They don't care. And it's like, at what point are people going to realize, wait a second, Team Bleeding Heart is a freaking fraud? Because Team Bleeding Heart, that's their brand that gets them all the cultural currency they have. It's the fact that we're the team for the official good guys, people who want to fit in with the herd and feel like they're cool and trendy and hip, people who want to feel like they're part of doing what's right or whatever. That's what their brand is. But every time you look at reality, it shows you a totally different reality. At what point will people stop going along with this kind of abusive ideology and say, I've had enough of this? It's time to just get back to reality here. Here's a study in the Huffington Post, a story in the Huffington Post that I wanted to read a little bit just to give you some context about Dr. Fauci. This is Huffington Post, which is a left-wing group by Sean Strub, says whitewashing AIDS history. This was published back in 2014 before left-wing media decided to be, mostly uniform in their worshipful devotion of whatever Dr. Fauci said on behalf of his big pharma clients. But whitewashing AIDS history, published in Huffington Post, says Dr. Fauci is rewriting history. He is doing so to disguise his shameful role in delaying promotion of an AIDS treatment that would have prevented tens of thousands of deaths in the first years of the epidemic. In my book, Body Counts, a memoir of politics, sex, AIDS, and survival, I recount how slow the federal government was in publicizing the use of Bactrim and other sulfa drugs to prevent the pneumonia that was then the leading killer of people with AIDS, PCP, in addition to its long time and well-known use to treat PCP. I point to Dr. Fauci in particular because he was and remains today the head of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the head of the federal government's AIDS research program. In 1987, pioneering AIDS activist Michael Callan begged Fauci for help in promoting the use of Bactrim as PCP prophylaxis and issuing interim guidelines urging physicians to prophylax those patients deemed at high risk for PCP. Fauci has taken exception to my account of the incident. In comments to the Washington Blade, he offered his version of the story. He says, so this is what Fauci said. So what actually happened is that Michael came to me and said, there is this preliminary activity in some small trials that Bactrim works, Fauci said. Would you come out and make a guideline to say it should be used by everybody? And I said, Michael, I can't do that, but what I can do is help design and make sure that the grantees that we fund do a clinical trial in Bactrim to prove or not that it was safe and effective, he said. But I didn't blow him off and say I don't want to issue guidelines. The fact is that's neither within my purview nor within the responsibility or authority I have to issue guidelines. Whether Fauci personally had this authority or not isn't the point. His excuse would be laughable if it wasn't so tragic. He was constantly traveling and speaking to the media and opining about everything related to AIDS research and treatment. In Arthur Kahn's book, Winter Wars, Larry Kramer pointed out that to get an appointment with Fauci, one didn't call his secretary, but his press officers, who book his talks and interviews like movie stars. He could easily have advocated awareness of the preventative treatment as the de facto federal AIDS czar. His influence was and is enormous. Had Fauci listened to people with AIDS and the clinicians treating them and responded accordingly, he would have saved thousands of lives. In the 2 years between 87, when Callan met with Fauci, in 89, when the guidelines were ultimately issued, nearly 17,000 people with AIDS suffocated from PCP. Most of these people might have lived had Fauci responded appropriately. When Callan and others, including Dr. Barry Ingo, a medical advisor to gay men's health crisis, met with Fauci to plead for his support, they didn't just say there was this preliminary activity in some small trials, as Fauci claims. They explained that many frontline AIDS physicians, following the lead of Dr. Joseph Sonabin, were already using Bactrim effectively to prevent the recurrence of PCP. The science was clear. A decade before, clinical trials by Dr. Walter Hughes had proven its efficacy at preventing PCP in other immune-compromised populations, like children with leukemia. Hughes suggested that Bactrim prophylaxis should be used whenever the recurrence rate of PCP was over 15%. Sonabin and community clinicians had demonstrated that the recurrence rate of PCP and AIDS was over 60% in the year following the first episode. If ever there was a group in urgent need of recommendation for Bactrim prophylaxis, it was people with AIDS. Fauci refused to acknowledge the evidence and, according to one account, even encouraged people with AIDS to stop taking treatments like Bactrim that weren't specifically approved for use in people with AIDS. Doesn't that sound familiar with what's going on today, my friends? This guy is a long, tried and true soldier for patented new products that the in crowd of big medical pharma giants want. Longtime treatment activist Richard Jeffries wrote in 2001 that Fauci, quote, went as far as telling activists attending an 87 meeting that there was no data to suggest PCP prophylaxis was beneficial and that it may in fact be dangerous. Sounds familiar? Sounds familiar, lefties? Are you starting to wake up here? When will you wake up? When will you read your own articles, your own people's work, your own history in terms of the stuff that your own left-wing writers write about, and start connecting the dots that these are not above the fray voices. These are political, crony correct voices. When will they wake up? Fauci's close colleague, Dr. Samuel Broder, who was head of the National Cancer Institute, even suggested, in the absence of any evidence at all, that the newly introduced antiretroviral AZT would make prophylaxis against PCP redundant. Ooh, a new product. Oh, that's always going to get favorable coverage from this click. In his comment to The Blade, Fauci fails to mention how skeptical he was of Bactrim as a preventative treatment, that he questioned the existing science, was unswayed by how frontline clinicians were treating people. Sound familiar, folks? Sound familiar to what's happening today with what frontline clinicians are doing all over the world, and yet Fauci is still playing from the same playbook? When are you going to wake up? These are crooks. They're liars. And it's shameful and a disgrace to this country that we can't have an honest press to call this facts out. This is their own left-wing outlets. We're treating people So he was unswayed by how frontline clinicians were treating people with AIDS and had suggested stopping a treatment that was already saving lives. Sonneman wrote in 2006, why in the case of AIDS was Bactrim, a known preventative measure against PCP, introduced so many years after a need for it had been recognized? To this must be added the question of why this neglect, the consequences of which can be measured in the tens of thousands of lives lost, has received almost no attention. Well, you know why it doesn't get any attention? Because we have shameful, disgraceful media outlets like ABC and CNN and NBC and shameful agencies. If we don't tell the truth about the history of the AIDS epidemic, it will be subject to more whitewashing, more distortions, and more rewriting to suit the legacies of the officials in charge. These are the same officials who seem incapable of ever acknowledging or taking responsibility for mistakes they make, mistakes that cost our community thousands of lives. That's the story in Huffington Post. It's time to get our facts straight, folks. It's time to actually educate ourselves and stop being fools. It's time to think straight. Let's take a quick break and return. More in just a moment on A Neighbor's Choice.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. Glad to be with you for our live broadcast today. We'll have Jeff Deist up in just a moment, as well as Dr. U for our Science in Use segment that we do every Thursday. But it's just amazing to see all these principles that we fight for, how they apply to so many different current events in our lives today, how we can make sense of so many different disparate topics. When we just see how when you abandon ethical principles and take shortcuts ethically, like our government and their crony friends do, it ends up catching up with you. And that's a terrible thing for folks who just want to have a simple, happy life and safe neighborhood and, pursue their creativity and their endeavors. We get bogged down by nonsense. I was looking at this graphic here. It has some interesting stuff. It's called Responding to Social Justice Rhetoric. And it says a cheat sheet for policymakers, and it's explaining what different terms they use mean. Like when they say, racial justice, what they mean is racial favoritism, which is using anti-discrimination laws for unrelated political purposes, a violation of equality before the law, or neo-racist, which is racism reborn as progressive and group stereotyping. If they say microaggression, what they mean is small slights perceived as bigotry, which is weaponizing the taking of offense to control others, putting perceived impact above actual intentions, claiming that normal everyday interactions are bigotry. If they say the word hate speech, what the McWoke means, it means it's an expression of opinion that the accuser finds objectionable, which is usually constitutionally protected speech. It's usually a reflection of political differences rather than any expression of hatred. And it's a way to restrict the speech of others by claiming it poses a danger. If they talk about discrimination, what that means for them is judgment based on experience, facts, predictions, and preferences, which is claimed to be inexcusable when exercised with respect to minoritized groups unless it makes them better off, claimed to be required against privileged groups to level the playing field, a tool to achieve equity, or it's also illegal. Accountability, that means using the intentional and social power to force compliance, which is bullying, mob rule, heckler's veto. Okay, so there's all these little terms that they throw out there to try to obscure reality. And it's important for us to kind of know these terms or just know what they're actually trying to say when they push these buzzwords. White privilege or white supremacy, what that means is European moral culpability. And that actually translates to racist scapegoating, especially against economically disadvantaged Europeans, neo-racist, racism reborn, progressive, and group stereotyping. When they say environmental justice, what they mean is environmental issues are race issues, which translates to using environmental protection for unrelated political purposes, an ineffective and inefficient way to protect the environment. So that's they have this word BIPOC folks with the X. That means non-European people, and that translates to used for neo-racist policies. So they have all these little language, and it reminds me of mythology in the past. Myths in the ancient world would use symbolic language to cover up a justification for mob violence or crowd aggression against minority groups or individuals that defy their groupthink. And we see that at play in our time today. So it's important to understand this stuff and to boldly represent the truth, which means the truth that we know in our hearts is right. Right and wrong doesn't change. It's not something we've got to invent. We don't got to create a new ideology or a new political movement. All we have to do is just do what's right and wrong and never stop. We do what's right, and we don't go along with cheapening basic moral principles. It's never okay to steal. It's never okay to lie. It's never okay to murder. It's never okay to go around and defraud people or to coerce people or to, forcibly subjugate people to do things or put things in their bodies they don't want to do. These are basic, fundamental civilizational achievements that we need to protect and actually fully live out, not to double down and go into this tribalism that's very tempting for some people in this country and around the world. So that's it for hour one of our broadcast. You can write your comments on our live stream. And up next, we'll have Science and You with Dr. Yu, as well as Jeff Deist from the Mises Institute. I'm David Gronowski. Godspeed.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park. Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. President Biden this hour will renew the nation's wartime effort against COVID. This time, a surge in cases being fueled by the Delta variant targeting the unvaccinated, including a record number of children. The 6-point strategy by the White House will include requiring federal workers to get vaccinated.
While the president can and will mandate that all federal workers and contractors get the vaccination, he cannot tell private companies what to do. He can, however, have OSHA require companies with 100 or more workers to either get the vaccine or do weekly testing. Hospital and medical facilities that receive Medicare and Medicaid must also vaccinate their workers. There are also provisions for schools, better testing, COVID care, and more federal economic aid.
ABC's Andy Field. The Justice Department suing the state of Texas over its new abortion law that bans procedures even in cases of rape and incest after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Attorney General Merrick Garland says it interferes with a woman's rights under federal law.
SB 8 is invalid under the Supremacy Clause, and the 14th Amendment is preempted by federal law and violates the doctrine of intergovernmental immunity.
The Texas law allows private citizens to enforce that law and receive $10,000 in reward for reporting anyone who may have violated the law. A spokesperson for the Texas governor says they are confident the courts will uphold the state law. In Doha, Qatar, a passenger plane full of evacuees from Afghanistan landing today. On board, SIV candidates as well as allies and some Americans. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said fewer Americans were on board than planned.
There were individuals who didn't show up today for a range of reasons. We know that will happen.
The aircraft was the first to leave Kabul since the U.S. withdrew troops. Other charter flights are still waiting to leave. You're listening to ABC News.
Let's see, if something costs less, but people are happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's MediShare. Maybe you've heard switching to MediShare to pay for healthcare can save the typical family $500 a month, and that's huge, but it's also true that people are way more satisfied after making the switch, too. The customer satisfaction rate for MediShare is double that of the typical health insurance plan. Double. MediShare works. It's been around for more than a quarter century, and members have shared more than $3 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network. So, yeah, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes. A very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. 877-26-BIBLE. That's 877-26-BIBLE. 877-26-BIBLE.
While the debate over abortion rages across the U.S., in France, the government announcing it will offer free birth control to all women up to age 25.
France's health minister announcing on television that the measure will go into effect on January 1st and will also include free medical visits about contraception. All contraceptive methods were already free for girls under 18. The health minister said it would be intolerable to think a young woman wasn't protecting herself because contraception was too expensive. Abortions are also free in France for all women and girls. Inez de la Cuetara, ABC News, Paris.
Vice President Kamala Harris meeting with officials from Mexico at the White House, trying to repair the economic ties severed under the previous administration.
Following this dialogue, I am confident that our nations will continue to work together, that our companies will continue to create jobs together, and that our people will enjoy greater prosperity and a greater quality of life.
In Hong Kong, a dozen pro-democracy activists have pleaded guilty to taking part in last June's unauthorized vigil. The gathering was to mark Beijing's crackdown in Tiananmen Square. Authorities have banned the vigils for the past 2 years, citing public health risks. But critics say it's all part of an ongoing crackdown on dissent following months of anti-government protests in 2019. This is ABC News.
Your nose is the body's air filter, the first line of defense against airborne allergens, bacteria, and viruses. You wash your hands to protect your health. Now you can clean your nose with Navage. Online at Navage.com. Navage. Clean nose, healthy life.
Guten Tag. That's German. Yeah, I'm bilateral. Your cousin. From Boston. Sam Adams Oktoberfest is back for a limited time. It's hearty with a roasty sweetness. Hey, I can swear in German too. Watch this. Das. The Boston Beer Company, Boston, Mass. Enjoy responsibly.
Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
News Talk 1040, Tampa Bay weather forecast.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Alan Archer at your News Talk 1040 WHBO Weather Center. Disturbance zone of showers and thunder showers is dropping southward into central Florida with a 45% chance of thunder showers this afternoon. High temperature up to 89, 35% tonight. Could see a few showers during the Bucks game, a low 78. Tomorrow, clouds, a 35% chance of an anytime thunder shower. High tomorrow, 88. Here at News Talk 1040 WHBO.
This portion of the upcoming amazing broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of Catania & Catania, award-winning personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
A Neighbor's Choice is live, and I'm your host, your neighbor, David Granotsky. So glad to be with you again for hour 2 of our live broadcast, coming to you on FM, AM. Again, from Central Florida, we join you if you're listening in the Tampa Bay area. You're part of our home base for what we do here. Make sure you go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, and sign up for our email list to get all of our content, because a lot of it is online only, in addition to this daily radio broadcast that we do with you. And so that's something you want to look forward to on aneighborschoice.com. You can also email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com. So today is Thursday, which means it's time for our Science in You segment. That's where you and science come together to learn about the world of physics and chemistry, nuclear energy, all kinds of different fields that are in the hard sciences. To do that, we have with us our Chief Science Advisor, physicist, Dr. Yu. How are you?
Thank you, David, for having me on, and I'm doing great.
That's great to hear. And it's always a nice thing to have you on to learn about what's going on in the world of science and physical science, so forth. We see this story here in Yahoo, says magnet milestones move distant nuclear fusion dream closer. This is a story, again, in Yahoo News, that teams working on 2 continents have marked similar milestones in their respective efforts to tap an energy source key to the fight against climate change. They've each produced very impressive magnets. On Thursday, scientists at the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor in southern France took delivery of the first part of a massive magnet so strong its American manufacturer claims it can lift an aircraft carrier almost 60 feet tall and 14 feet in diameter when fully assembled. The magnet is a crucial component in the attempt by 35 nations to master nuclear fusion. MIT scientists and a private company announced separately this week that they too have hit a milestone with a successful test of the world's strongest high-temperature superconducting magnet that may allow the team to leapfrog ITER in the race to build a sun on Earth. Unlike existing fission reactors that produce radioactive waste and sometimes catastrophic meltdowns, proponents of fusion say it offers a clean and virtually limitless supply of energy. If, that is, scientists and engineers can figure out how to harness it. They have been working on the problem for nearly a century. So, Dr. Yu, what's your take on this latest story here?
So this is another focus on all the renewable new energy for the future energy. Seems like all the way to still on so-called the nuclear fusion reaction. So this is emphasize the key components. So this story tells we have 2 competitive, parallel nuclear research going on. One in Europe, which actually sponsored part by United States, is international cooperated research. It lasts over decades, started in 2007, and now, that's today, actually, it's in European time, today, to deliver the world of the strongest magnets. That's the key components for the nuclear reactor, for the ITER. So that's an international thermonuclear experimental reactor. And the claim is how strong the magnet is. It can lift an aircraft carrier. So why we need a huge magnets? Because we use a magnet field to contain, plasma field. We heat the plasma when anything's heated, it is becomes ionized gas. So that's called plasma. And the plasma is actually a magnetic field. Itself is a magnetic matter flowing. So we use strong magnets to contain and compress them in order to create a collision and to generate a nuclear reaction. So that's the basic principle. However, since this started in 2007 and now only delivered one key part of the heart of this reactor. So that's a big magnet made in the United States. And the schedule is expected so right now is complete about called 75%, and it's aim at fire up. So first started to fire up by 2026. So there's another 5 years to go, and with the cost is already $20 billion so far, and by 2026, so probably another $10 billion will be on top. And the result is not guaranteed. So even in the article, it mentioned about it is that even it's failed with a 35 nation cooperation and shared by all the countries, including the United States, Russia, Japan, and even include China and South Korea or something. But as they said, even if it's failed, and the countries involved worlds have mastered the technique can be used in other fields. So fusion reaction is still the hardest, clean energy by the international corporate in the world, and it's a huge investment. For this project, it's already $20 billion with 35 million nations cooperation, and still 5 years away from first started running this reactor. And so this reactor does not generate electricity directly. So it's still generated heat, right? We have to convert it to electricity. So for practical use, it's still a long way to go. And in the parallel, so there's a U.S. effort that's from MIT and cooperated with a private company called the Commonwealth Fusion System. So they said we build much smaller. However, so we are still use a new technique to build a fusion reaction. So that we use a smaller magnets. However, it's about 40 times smaller than those huge 60 feet, and 14 feet diameter magnet. So we build one with a 40 times smaller magnet. However, the magnetic field strength will be twice as what by the European, this international nuclear project. So that's another way. And both are, even though both efforts claim, so for MIT one and still years to go. Yeah. So it hopes by 2030s. So that's a longer time. I think longer probably could see some results.
Yeah, there's this story and this other Yahoo story, laser-initiated fusion leads the way to safe, affordable, clean energy. Is this story basically talking about the same experiment? I get them all confused, because I generally learn from you that none of them are going to work. So I just kind of lump them all in the same project, even though I know there's different ones going on.
Oh, yes, because the fusion could potentially provide a limitless energy, right? So that's why so many different research. So this one, you just said the new article, this new one's called right. What is the title of the project? Laser initiated fusion leads a new way to safe and affordable. So this is actually new U.S. government. So that's called the agency is called Livermore National Laboratory, Lawrence Livermore Network, U.S. government project. Try to create a fusion. But this is the breakthrough here. I believe this has a higher probability and ahead of other nuclear fusion projects. They said that they use a laser as an initiator. use laser as an initiator. Use a laser striking a capsule, a fuel capsule with nuclear isotopes, hydrogen isotopes. Okay. Use a laser as a trigger to induce explosion of the fuel capsules. By induce the fuel capsules and then create a chain reaction of a nuclear reaction. So this is it's a little bit different than use a big, huge magnets to control, like a donut-shaped magnetic magnets control a vacuum chamber, and like the plasma has a high velocity impact each other. So this is a little bit different. They use a laser as a trigger, induce explosion of capsules, the fuel capsules, and the create a nuclear reaction. And however, the results, it is that it can create like 70%, can induce 70% of energy use this method of what you packed in, and still short of 100%. So the goal would be create more energy than we imported, right? So we can use extra energy to generate electricity and keep the process self-contained. So we can generate more energy and power this process to do. But this one with a 70% of energy, can export energy from the fuel. But the improvement is previously we only can have a 3% utilize this one. So this is a way big step towards nuclear fusion to use. However, still short of the final goal to create more than 100% energy than we imported.
Right.
So that's the results. Yeah.
Well, very interesting. So again, you would say these models are still barking up the wrong tree in terms of what they should be doing to get nuclear energy, right?
That's correct. Because right now, the concept of nuclear fusion is to fuse, to collide and generate huge heat, to fuse lighter elements like hydrogen elements, fuse them together to become heavy elements, and in order to create more extra energy during the fusion process. But I believe this fusion concept is not correct concept. I believe there is nothing you can fusing two things together create more energy. Actually, when you're fusing two things together, you only consume more energy. So this is the whole things to try to use high temperature, compress hydrogen atoms and to make an impact and create a fuse like helium and to create more energy. This is not the way energy will be created. The so-called energy created. Actually, this is basically when I explain this concept, I just say when we have a nuclear fusion reaction, say nuclear hydrogen bomb, we do detect it. There's a product from that reaction with a product about heliums. With helium is the two hydrogen atoms plus neutrons, right? So that's the concept where people think, if we measure helium as a product, we should assuming we fuse the hydrogen atom together. That's not what happens. True, what happens really, just like the current rocket fuel, we have oxygen, liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. We separate them. But when we launch them, we spark them, we let the hydrogen fuel and the oxygen fuel, they react together. That's the reaction create energy. However, the product after reaction, what happens? You always see the plume. You always see the plume, behind the rocket. Those are white plume. What is that? The white gas. This is the water. So water is the product after hydrogen and oxygen reaction. When they reaction, they generate huge heat and a huge velocity. But after they cooling down, the hydrogen atom and the oxygen atom are cooling down. They are charged particles, right? Now they do chemical reaction and form resultant substance that's water. So those plume is the water vapors, steam, water steams. So the same thing to the nuclear fusion we call the hydrogen. When two hydrogen atoms, when they are charging and interacted, they generate huge energy because like charge repel, right? Because they are interact, they impact each other and create a higher repulsion force and high velocity. So energy is during the reaction, the like particle impact reaction. So that's where it comes in. But after the energy spent, after they slow down, after the hydrogen atoms slow down, what happens? They formed helium. They formed helium molecules. Helium molecule has two hydrogen atoms and plus other neutrons, right? So that's why. So when we observe helium, it's a product. It's a resultant product after nuclear reaction.
Very interesting. We're speaking with Dr. Yu on our Science in You segment. We're going to take a quick break and return in just a moment.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman.
David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com. or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
A Neighbor's Choice is back. I want to give a shout out to our friends at Oakley Transport. They don't leave people behind. They make sure that everybody is taken care of in their community, and they give back to the community in so many different ways by investing in different key ways to improve the quality of life for people around them. One of the things they're looking for are qualified drivers, CDLA licensed drivers who are qualified and experienced, ready to hit the road, keeping America fed. We don't want to have food shortages and empty shelves with all the nonsense from D.C. So we want to make sure that people who are safe drivers, who take care of themselves and those on the road around them, are on the road, making sure the food stays nice and stocked wherever it needs to go. So if you want to be a part of that adventure, go to oakleytransport.com and let them know A Neighbor's Choice sent you. Dr. Yu, we return now with Science in You. So that's the thing that we need to get back to, is understanding that the fusion model itself is fundamentally flawed, correct?
That's correct. I often get questions say, so This is fusion. We observe the fusion has a product. When we measure after fusion reaction, and we do see we can measure we can find that we have a more helium, like helium-3 or something. We can measure it. So those things previously does not exist. Why after fusion, and we measure that, so we know it happens. I said that's correct. What we measured is a residual product, just like when hydrogen and oxygen react, create heat, right? That's a rocket fuel, and the product will be water. So that's the steam, the white steam. That's a water vapor, because after oxygen and hydrogen atoms slowing down, and then what happens? And then they combine form the water, H2O. And the same thing for fusion reaction with hydrogen as a hydrogen fuel. When they are react, so the two called ion particles, those hydrogen, so they are charged particles. When they are interact, they are like pole, repel, and unlike pole attract. So what happens? They create a huge vibration and velocity. So that's what heat, right? High random vibrations. That's a generated heat. And then after they cooling down, after cooling down, the two hydrogen atoms. So people ask, how could the two hydrogen atoms form a helium? They are like pole repel, right?
Right.
And when they cooling down, they can repel. Let me tell you the secrets. All the charged particles, called the protons. That's what the protons, the hydrogen proton. They are magnetic particles. They not only have a positive charge, they also have a negative charge. They are magnets, have a positive and north and south poles. They have a both charge. When they cooling down, they are able to forming a nucleus, and that nucleus is instead of a hydrogen nucleus, that becomes helium nucleus.
So it's not that we need super high heat, right? That's not the key issue.
No. That's actually, you have the cooling down to make that product to be stable product. So that's helium. Helium is stable, most stable, is an inert gas. We don't need high heat to create that result.
That's amazing how when you get a theoretical foundation incorrect, it can send you off chasing after billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions, doing things that will never result in the outcome that you're looking for.
That's correct. And I believe your audience is a younger audience. We will have a day, late 2030s. And I believe by that time, we will still won't have those kind of successful, results from the two nuclear fusion reaction group.
Well, we see that pattern in so many other fields, including medical science, where we've been having a war on cancer since Nixon declared it, and yet we spend billions and billions and billions chasing after the same wrong foundational theory that cancer is primarily a genetic disease rather than a metabolic disease, and it produces no results too. So it's no surprise that this same kind of groupthink also distorts a rarefied field like nuclear energy.
That's right.
Dr. Yu, I really appreciate you. Great discussion today, great explanation for what's really where we need to look at for understanding nuclear energy. Always great to hear from you.
Thank you very much.
And check out our website, aneighborschoice.com, and click on Science and You to watch this episode on demand on video and audio, wherever you want, and as well as all the other catalog of science episodes that we've done. When we continue, we're going to hear from Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute, as he responds to Biden's new edict from on high. He's mad. He's mad about what happened in Afghanistan. He wants to take it out on you, apparently. Back in just a moment.
It was about 9 o'clock in the morning.
We stood and watched in disbelief.
I was scared. We watched that second plane hit that tower.
I literally just froze.
Kind of shocked.
afraid.
Saw this terrorist act and
This moment isn't real.
It was the day that changed America forever.
It was two realizations, right? One, that the immediate death toll, and then that this was an attack on America.
I don't want people to ever forget.
News Talk 1040.
Employers with more than 100 workers must require COVID-19 vaccines or weekly tests. It's part of President Biden's new six-pronged strategy to slow the spread of the virus.
Well, America is much better shape than it was 7 months ago when I took office. I need to tell you a second fact. We're in a tough stretch, and it could last for a while.
It also lowers the price of at-home tests. A federal planning document says the government's gotten requests for 975 ventilators from 6 states. The Justice Department suing the state of Texas over a new abortion law. Attorney General Merrick Garland.
The act is clearly unconstitutional under long-standing Supreme Court precedent.
A spokesman for Governor Greg Abbott says they're confident the courts will uphold the law. The State Department says more than 30 U.S. citizens and permanent residents were invited to be passengers on the first chartered flight out of Kabul since the American evacuation ended. Some said no. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
News Talk 1040, Tampa Bay weather forecast.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm meteorologist Alan Archer at your News Talk 1040 WHBO Weather Center. Disturbance zone of showers and thunder showers is dropping southward into central Florida with a 45% chance of thunder showers this afternoon. High temperature up to 89, 35% tonight. Could see a few showers during the Bucks game, a low 78. Tomorrow, clouds, a 35% chance of an anytime thunder shower. High tomorrow 88. Here at News Talk 1040 WHBO.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A Neighbor's Choice is back. We're live on radio. I'm David Gronowski here. And as I mentioned, Biden is very sore, and his handlers are very sore that they made an epic fail of being able to withdraw properly out of Afghanistan. It looked like the Keystone Cops, a bunch of dummies, caught their pants down in front of the whole world laughing at these fools. So now they want to go beat up on people at home to try to get their anger and try to redirect some scapegoating energy on the domestic population. So with that said, they've announced, hey, he's going to do the bidding of Big Pharma and be even more aggressive and do some more dictatorial style medical fascism with his new announcement today. So Jeff Deist, the president of the Mises Institute, joins us now to talk about it. How you doing, Jeff?
Hi, David. I'm doing great.
It's great having you on. And here we are again, man. We thought this thing would be behind us, that they'd leave us alone. But of course, no, you can't expect that with D.C. They want to harass people. They want to shred the rule of law while they hide behind the claim that they're all about constitutional rights when it comes to, Texas's assertion of abortion law. So look at this story here in the AP. It says Biden on Thursday is announcing sweeping new federal vaccine requirements affecting as many as 100 million Americans in an all-out effort to increase COVID-19 vaccinations. And he's going to require that all employers with more than 100 workers require them to be vaccinated or test for the virus weekly, affecting about 80 million Americans. And roughly 17 million workers at health facilities that receive federal Medicare or Medicaid also will have to be fully vaccinated. He's doing this by executive order. He's going to require vaccination for employees of the executive branch and contractors who do business with the federal government with no option to test out. that covers several million more workers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you hit the nail on the head that he's doing this in part to try to look authoritative and presidential after the debacle he's had over the last couple of weeks. Because first and foremost, as much as the media is in his favor and in his corner, he was unable to control the narrative around Afghanistan, and it really looked bad, and it was bad. A lot of people suffered, and a lot of people are still suffering. So that was obviously very bad optics, very bad politics for Biden. But now, the Delta variant is the trumped-up reason for these new impositions. And, of course, the media has been part and parcel of, again, whipping up hysteria over Delta, because if you really look at the numbers, a lot of people are getting sick or they're testing positive, but they're not getting very sick. And so hospitalizations and deaths are not up. This is a smaller wave. So that justification just isn't true. And that's what viruses do. They constantly evolve, they morph, and in almost all cases, each successive variant of a virus is less lethal than before, even if more transferable. So, or transmissible, I should say. So, if we're all getting little colds and flus and sniffles, so be it. It's called the flu, and this one takes the form of the Delta variant. So it's disheartening. He's doing things which, from my perspective, are blatantly unconstitutional, which is another way of saying blatantly illegal. And, none of it's justified. I mean, we have a COVID virus which has a 0.001% fatality rate. You don't shut down the world for that, and you don't go bossing businesses around. I even see that he is going to require big retailers like Walmart to sell at-home COVID tests at cost. So, we're even down in the nitty-gritty of price control. So the whole thing is it's pretty shocking, but this is what you ought to expect from a president who's hobbled, is that he'd lash out, and I think that's what he's doing today.
Or maybe it's a call for help from his buddies in big media and big farmers. Hey, help, bail me out. Big military's mad at me. Come, give me some help. I'll do your bidding. So there's different ways to look at it. Kelly Torrance, a commentator, says online, she quotes President Biden just said, "We're going to protect the vaccinated from unvaccinated coworkers." Doesn't this undermine confidence in vaccines? If the vaccines work, the vaccinated don't need protection from the unvaccinated. The vaccines provide the protection, and they work. So that's what she's saying. So their whole argument doesn't make any 1 ounce of sense. This is the most insane anarcho-tyranny I think we've ever seen so far.
Well, they've created this fog around the idea of the unvaccinated somehow being responsible for making Delta a bigger thing than it otherwise would be. There's no proof of that. As a matter of fact, there might be proof to the contrary. I don't know that they would ever honestly report this, but there is anecdotal evidence. I can't say for sure that maybe even a majority of people hospitalized with Delta are vaccinated. I'm not sure that they'll ever report that accurately. So we don't know. But the bottom line here is that we have a survivable virus. We have a virus which is treatable by a bunch of conventional medications. At least half of the COVID deaths in the first round last spring could have been easily prevented. And any concerns that people have right now about harms are, all you have to do is just stay home if that's what you want to do. And I bet your employer would allow you to work from home. Older people, if they're worried about Delta, they can stay away from other people. But that's about it. That's about all society should be doing. Wash your hands a little more often. That's all that this Delta variant warrants.
I mean, again, though, that what she's saying, that his quote is, "We're going to protect the vaccinated from the unvaccinated coworkers." If the vaccination is protecting them, why do they need further protection? Their own CDC says those that have the vaccine are still transmitting it, and some of their evidence suggests they have the same viral load. What in the world is possibly the cause for this?
Well, I mean, they need to be protected from the unclean people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what this is. This is a massive gaslighting. It's over COVID, because they realized when this virus came along that it provided an opportunity to have a lot of things that tyrants have always wanted to have over us. Control over our movement, control over our work, control over our travel, control over our food. But by couching it in terms of health and public health, it doesn't seem as Orwellian or tyrannical as, let's say, a gun confiscation or something like that. So really, in a sense, COVID's been a huge gift to the progressive left, because they want to control society, and there's no better way to get people to go along than scare them about their own health. I mean, that's brilliant. So I think that's a lot of what's at work here. But this is, again, a president who's lashing out. This is the kind of thing that we would expect from a lawless government. That's what anarcho-tyranny means. It means government can do whatever it wants, and certain individuals in society can do whatever they want without fear of prosecution. But you and I have to worry at every turn. So it's troubling. But you know what, David? The flip side is I think it's really unleashing a sleeping giant. I mean, look at all the interest in Florida and DeSantis over the last year. Look at all the interest in South Dakota and Kristi Noem. People are starting to see. I think that's probably the best thing here. The silver lining is that we're seeing what these people. And I don't want to say the left broadly. I think that's unfair. I want to say that authoritarians of whatever stripe. This is what they really believe. They want everyone to spend their lives not worrying about this great young Canadian girl up at the U.S. Open who's having an incredible run, or Tom Brady. Gosh, you're broadcasting out of Tampa. Tom Brady's coming back this weekend. Or you have your kid's soccer game, or you have whatever They want you basically having your whole life revolve around government, and the way to do that is to constantly whip up fear and hysteria. And then have these kind of diabolical announcements by someone like Biden. I mean, to talk about protecting the vaccinated from the unvaccinated is really the kind of language that you would expect from a foreign military opponent.
Right.
Let's just say, it sounds like he's talking about the Huns.
Yeah.
You can't. The amount of contempt and hatred that these folks have for their own citizens is really something. It's really striking.
Yeah, J.D. Vance, he's running for Senate in Ohio. He says Biden is talking about tens of millions of American citizens like they're vermin. What a disgusting, vile man. So nice. Yeah, it's very rare to hear a Senate Republican talk like that. I tell you what, just calling it directly like that.
Well, yes.
When you look at this kind of stuff, it reminds us why it's so important for us to have decentralized power. You talk about this all the time, the need to get back to state and local governance and the governance of the people. Do you think, is there any way this can, you're also, someone who's of the law and as an attorney, what is your take on the legality? Is this thing going to hold up to be able to mandate everybody who's got 100 employees or more has to force this on their employees? How can that stand legally with all the different checks and balances we're supposed to have?
Well, unfortunately, these lawsuits, which some governors have already suggested that they'll bring, Kristi Noem among them in South Dakota, unfortunately, they'll be brought in federal court. And when you're in federal court, you're basically appealing to the very people who are paid by the entity which you're suing. So that's always a problem. I suspect they'll be upheld because although there's no public health exception in the Constitution, we've seen this sort of thing a lot of times in the past. And there's all kinds of employer mandates via OSHA that go to ostensibly, worker health and safety. Everything from, who can operate a forklift to whether your kitchen has to meet a certain degree of cleanliness. So I think that this would probably be upheld by courts.
You saw the people in Australia now, they've been limited to 6 beers a day is all they can order into their house arrest situation. And they're inspecting, this is in New South Wales, they're checking the packages of their groceries to make sure it's 6 beers max. I think, is it a day or a week? I don't know how much the Australians are drinking right now. Probably a lot more than they used to.
If that's a week, they got a real problem.
They're really trying to clamp down on their happiness. But 6 beers a day is all you can have now, Jeff. I'm sure that Biden and Fauci would love to do that as long as it didn't rock the boat with their donors and so forth, right?
Well, there's actually a fascinating parallel with that. Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin tried to do that very thing in the former Soviet Union. They during some of the times when they were really struggling towards the fall in the late 80s, their economists were telling them, that, wow, we've got serious economic problems, and part of it is just the laziness and drunkenness of our employees. So they really cracked down heavily on alcohol. And they were taking drunk people out into Siberia in mass out of bars and leaving them in the snow to walk home 50 miles and this sort of thing. And after a while, they lost so much tax revenue from the lost alcohol sales that they said, people were sort of less angry and more malleable when we let them drink as much as they want. So all of a sudden, alcohol reappeared and it was for sale everywhere. But, it's just, no matter what you do with human beings, you can't change their nature. And so it's like squeezing on a balloon. When Australia locks people down, there's going to be that's an action. There's going to be a reaction, and that's just the way of the world. That's just the way of the corporeal world that we live in. And so I don't know if Biden imagines that this is going to work out swimmingly for him. I think it's up to us to make sure that it's viewed as an outrage.
Yeah, when I see this type of action demonizing, treating people as less than human because they don't want to put these, products that haven't had 10 to 15 years of proper study into their kids and so forth. It's absolutely repulsive, the treatment that people are turning against their own neighbors. It reminds me of other moments of authoritarianism rising up that pitted people neighbor against neighbor and tore up families. It makes me wonder, again, the historian Rene Girard identifies many times in history when there's a plague or a famine, people get caught up in a kind of plague of contagious hatred for a common enemy. And I see that happening now, and it's a shame that after 2,000 years of being influenced by Christianity, that we're still falling back into this primitive, brutish, barbaric, savage behavior to try to turn against. I mean, Jeff, I see this in a more direct way. My friend Monica Paulus, we had her on the show recently. She's from Papua New Guinea. She had to flee the island because they were literally trying to burn her at the stake because they thought she was a witch because she had money or something. So in their culture, they still believe if someone gets sick in the village, you can just point to someone and say, hey, they're a witch, get them. And they will literally burn her alive. And they tried to. And we said, get out of there. She got out of there. Then they go after her kids. So in some cultures, they do it in a more direct way. But in America, we're doing it with this veneer of sterility and bureaucratic scientism, which is just repulsive to see this,
Absolutely. And that's exactly what it is. It's scientism. And let's not forget that this is all about politics for Joe Biden. I mean, when he says we have to protect people against the unvaccinated, he might as well be saying who are all Republicans, right? I mean, let's not forget that point, David.
Right, yeah. Or Tulsi Gabbard. They hate her more than Republicans. Let's take a quick break. We're speaking with Jeff Deist of the Mises Institute. You can follow him at Jeff Deist on Twitter or check out Mises.org for all of their content related to the economy, money, how it works. Stay with us. More in just a moment when we return.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. You can call in at 727-587-1040. That's 727-587-1040. Or drop us a comment on live stream online. Looking at some of the comments, some say, let the games begin. Can't say that I find that surprising, what's been going on with Biden's edicts. Matt says, United State of Florida. Another, Joseph says, sleeping giant, please wake up. Another, Jason says, our leaders are trying to compete with Australia's leaders, apparently, all trying to show the Davos crowd, hey, look at us. We can, treat our people more like cattle than the other guys. Look how good we're doing at this. That's what we continue to see, the kind of race towards stupidity, and as Jeff Deist, our guest now, calls it, anarcho-tyranny, as others have been using that term as well. But again, this comes on the news. Moderna shares rise after company reveals a single-shot vaccine booster for COVID and the flu. So is this a BOGO or something? My goodness. Or I guess this is combines the current COVID vaccine with the flu shot. So you get a BOGO deal. That's very generous of them after the windfall they're making with our government. Here's another story in Bloomberg. I wanted to get your take on this, Jeff. It says, Bloomberg says White House says meat packer consolidation is raising the grocery bill. So they're doing the old playbook. Isn't that what FDR and all the other little tyrants used to do? Whenever the prices go up or something, or they always want to blame that, it's the meat guys or something that's causing prices to rise.
Yeah, what's causing prices to rise is government and the central bank spending and creating money like drunken soldiers. That's what's causing prices to rise, not to mention the fact that all that new money is chasing fewer goods because they shut down the world for a year. And supply chains are unbelievably affected. David, I read an article the other day in CNBC. It basically said in the headline, hey, these disruptions are going to get worse. Buy your Christmas presents now. And it was all about what the lockdowns around the world have done to supply chain. I mean, we live in a world where we expect basically global delivery. And holding inventory became something that companies avoided. Everything now is just-in-time inventory because it costs money to hold stuff. So because of the shutdowns, and especially with respect to semiconductor chips, which mostly come from Taiwan, and they go into everything, Ford F-150s, refrigerators, toys, iPhones, Xboxes, you name it. There's these huge backlogs, and we saw that last year with timber. We've seen with oil, all kinds of things. So now we have all these cargo ships sitting idle off the coast of California, the port of Long Beach and port of Los Angeles. You have containers sitting at those ports for weeks instead of the usual couple days. You have too few truck drivers to come pick up the containers because there's a truck driver shortage. As a result of these containers sitting, you have a container shortage around the world. And then to pile on top of all that, the cargo ships and the trucks affect the freight rail schedule for trains. So this is a huge domino effect. And given all this uncertainty, nobody knows what to charge for things, whether they're a supplier or a buyer, whether that's a retail finished good or, some kind of higher stage production good, some kind of raw material. Nobody knows what the hell to charge for things because of all this uncertainty and all these delays. And so you put it all together and you realize that shutting down the world as they did doesn't come without a cost. You can't just flip a switch and have everything back to normal. And, those huge ships sitting out there in Long Beach, that's the stick of deodorant you buy at Target or whatever it might be. So, go to your local Target, go to your local grocery. I wouldn't be surprised if you see some thinner shelves than usual.
Yeah, I've been seeing that here, and it's very sad to see. Never thought America could have that kind of thing happen so fast, but it's amazing how much they can really do a number to prosperity. So I think they're going to double down on trying to demonize, the food suppliers and companies for rising costs at the bill, rather than recognize that it's the obvious reality of inflation creeping up on them. And that's something that you guys at the Mises Institute have been warning about for some time. And here it comes, and here comes the typical playbook of blaming somebody else for what the crooks are doing.
Yeah, and inflation is a monetary phenomenon. That's the most important thing for people to understand. The second thing is that it doesn't spread throughout the economy evenly. So there are people who benefit from inflation. That's what people don't understand. David, if all of a sudden tomorrow, price of everything, every good and service in America doubled, but at the same time somehow the government could magically double all of our bank balances, then it wouldn't much matter, right? We'd all be in the same position we were in today. But that's not how it works. The new money and credit government creates flows to the economy unevenly. It starts out in the commercial bank sector, and then it tends to flow into industries which are close to that, like government, like defense contracting, like housing and mortgages. So that usually the poorest Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, work hourly wages, or perhaps retired and really reliant on their Social Security, their Social Security check is not rising nearly as quickly as the amount of money flowing into that defense contractor. So, when the left does have an argument that government is an engine of inequality, they just don't understand, in my opinion, the monetary element of it. In other words, they view the Fed as a good thing because, gee whiz, it keeps interest rates low and it helps poor people qualify for a mortgage and that sort of thing. But that's not the Fed's job. The Fed's job is to guard the dollar like a junkyard dog guards the auto scrap place, and that they're doing the opposite. They're purposely inflating it. So I think that's something we all have to understand and grapple with.
Yeah, so it'll continue to affect a kind of redistribution effect, right, from the poor and the middle class and those on fixed incomes, giving their purchasing power diluted, and the rich and the crony capitalists that elect the people that run D.C. and so forth, they'll be enriched by this transfer, right?
Yeah, no question. There are people who are involved in the system, who game the system, who understand what's going on. The investment industry, for example, a lot of folks in that industry can sort of go out and make moves, shorting or long selling, whatever they do, to understand. They have a better understanding of capital markets and what monetary expansion means, so they can get out in front of it to protect themselves. But the average person just has some dollars in their bank account, and they're not out there doing all these things. They're just going to work to try to make some of those dollars. So when all of a sudden, the same amount of work and the same paycheck gets them less stuff, I think that becomes, hopefully, if nothing else, trouble for Biden.
Yeah. And now, the average person, if they work for a company with 100 employees, they just realize that this dictator has now told them they must take this experimental product, rushed to market by Orange Man Bad, or they're out of a job too. So this is a really nightmarish moment for a lot of people. So our thoughts and prayers are with our fellow Americans as they navigate this awful time. Thanks again, Jeff Deist, for joining us.
Thanks, David.
And visit Mises.org for more from Jeff Deist and his organization. I'm David Granosky. Godspeed.
Your home for